Right, honestly, that card last week was probably one of the worst cards in the last 2 years for a fight night. And I don't want to go into detail, but anyways, got a good one here early, no 5 a.m., almost 6 a.m. card. So Long Zhao versus Chang Li. This one's hard to pick because I don't really rate any of them, but I would go with Chang Li by decision or third round TKO. One thing I've noticed with Chang Li, he tends to start off quite slow, but his cardio is very good. And he can be prone to be getting taken down as well as him getting takedowns as well. Like he gets positions, loses positions, gets one, loses one. And then you've got Long Zhao, who's more like a brawler, who wants to trade with you constantly, who has got a very good ground game and he's got a very good armbar. But one thing that he has struggled with in the past is being put on the back foot. Like when he got put on the back foot against that grappler, I can't remember his name. Let me find it right here. Show he knows. He was a very good jiu-jitsu guy. He kept attacking him with like submissions and he didn't know what to do. And I'm expecting in a fight with Chang Li, I think Long Zhao will start off the first round much better. So if I was going to say what will happen, I'm very confident in an over 1.5 because Chang Li, I think he might be scared of the jiu-jitsu of Long Zhao, so he might keep it on the feet a bit longer. And he has got a very good chin. He's got good forward pressure. I don't think Long Zhao is going to be able to deal with it because you see him doing well when he was going forwards. And when he's going backwards, he can struggle like the Christian Quinones fight in the Contender. He got dropped because he was going backwards. And Chang Li does well when he's going forward. His best round will be the third round. So a third round TKO possible, but I don't really think he has got that much power. You might see he's got a few KOs, but a lot of them are from when he's on the ground with his opponent and he's able to TKO them either because they're tired or because he's got a good like ground and pound game when he gets to that point. But for me, it's going to a decision. Right, Magomed Gadzhiyasulov versus Brendson Ribeiro. You're not going to like what I'm going to say here. I'm going to tell you why I'm going with it. I'm going with Brendson Ribeiro by KO in the second round. I was thinking the first round, but I'll tell you why. This Magomed Gadzhiyasulov, I will say it again, a lot of these fighters, just because they have an "ov" in their name, they do get overrated. Like a guy said in the comments before, I remember. That is true. And this is one of the examples of it. He looked extremely good in the Contender, 30-27 his opponent. But I'm not being fazed by that one fight because there is a record, I believe. A lot of Contender Series opponents, when they make their debut, they tend to lose. That's not why I'm going with it, by the way, but I'm just saying. And I think with Ribeiro, the reason he lost the last fight is because he was getting too engaged in close range. He was in range where he was going to get caught with a hook or something instead of staying on the outside and winning the fight like he was doing early, landing that cross, even lead with your backhand. But I think with the range that this guy's got, he should be able to defend against the takedowns of Gadzhiyasulov early, because Gadzhiyasulov's not one of these grapplers who's got very good jiu-jitsu with it. It's more like, I'm going to hold you down and lay on top of you type of grappling. And I think with him, because he's coming out of what's the KHK, I think they're being very overrated, but I do see heavy favourite. I don't think he should be. I think you're being phased. Recency bias would make you think that. Like, this guy, I don't think he's got the power to knock out a Ribeiro. I really don't. His striking on the feet is very sloppy. There isn't much head movement. He's been hit a lot. Ribeiro's chin is suspect, but he's not coming up against a guy, in my opinion, who's going to be able to do like serious damage, because one, this guy's range is better, his striking's a lot better, and the competition they've both faced, I would argue that Ribeiro's has been better, even though both of them haven't been too great. But when you actually look at his fights, they have not looked good. And that's why I'm surprised to see as a huge underdog to win this fight. But I actually am going to go with him to win by KO in the second round. Way too sloppy, Gadzhiyasulov, but I can see why you're going to go with him. He's a huge favourite. If it goes to a decision, it will probably, if it's a close fight, 100% they're going to go with Gadzhiyasulov. I can just see that happening, but you never know. Right, Muin Gafurov versus Kang. There's a lot of things that could happen in this fight, so it's not one where it's a clear-cut win for either. but I am actually going with Gafurov to win via decision. One thing I noticed from Kyung in his last fight, his pace isn't the problem. It's the decision making I've seen him do. And you could argue meaning Gafurov's decision making's been poor. The amount of times this guy shoots in with a double leg, telegraphs it, and leaves his chin open for guillotines is unbelievable. But then when I look it's against Magomedov, I'll let him off. But the John Castaneda fight, he was just getting bullied with the grappling and the pace. But I think one thing he was doing is overthrowing and swinging. And one thing I noticed from Kang in that John Castaneda fight, every time Castaneda would enter the pocket with like a hook, like leading off with the hook, Kang would turn away his back, give away his back, and use that position to try and defend takedowns. And I'm thinking, if you come up against me and Gafurov, there is a high chance a KO could happen. And I know Kang has got a good chin, but if you're turning your head away, look at Deontay Wilder against Zhang, for example. You turn away your head like that, and that's what he was doing because he was entering with takedowns. You're either going to get your back taken and controlled, or you're going to get hit clean on the temple because you're turning into it. So you're moving into the momentum of the punch, which is going to have more power and damage from that strike. I'm meaning Gafurov's a guy where he kind of throws recklessly. And the debate you could make is if you look at the Quinones fight with Kang, when he came in aggressively, he got countered. Kang was able to drop him down to the ground. But I think because of Gafurov's wrestling ability, I think we're going to see a similar thing to the John Castaneda where it's not a lot of leg kicks, it's a lot of overhands, Rashad Evans, overhands into that double leg takedown. But Rashad Evans said like overhand into singles. But I think he was going to do a lot of doubles, take the back, and control him on the ground. And I believe he looks a bit bigger than Kang as well. So I expect him to win a decision over Kang. And Kang's getting older now. And he doesn't look bad. That's not the problem. It's just that this matchup, turning your back away against a guy who's going to try and grapple with you, it's just not a good idea. And can pull you down to the ground. It's all about his head positioning and whether he can get submitted. But yeah, I think he'll win that. Right, Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Nicolas Dalby. Right, hear me out. This is a bad matchup for Rinat for his style, and I'll tell you why. Rinat is high pace, looking for early finishes, throwing with power. Everything he hits you with is power. But one thing he can do in the second round, if it's on the feet, is slow down. Nicolas Dalby is a guy who he doesn't care. For his age, he has stupid levels of cardio. He's got more cardio than Rinat and more than a lot of these welterweights. Like, he is one of the most underrated welterweights in the division. But he then loses to a guy like Tim Means and makes you think, like, what the like, I'm going with Rinat. But, again, I don't think he can finish Dalby because Dalby is one of those guys where it's very hard to finish because if you exert so much energy early, your power's going to deteriorate. Yeah, it'll be there, but Rinat's power fades after the first round. Like, look at that second round with Aliskerov. It's very predictable. It's a lot of, like, rangy, straight punches, or if they're not straight, they come over the top and they're very telegraphed to see, but he throws a jab before setting them up. And Nicolas Dalby, knowing his IQ, he will be able to figure it out. So I think it'll be a very, very close, arguably split. And I think he's going to make it to a decision for Rinat. I think Rinat's going to have to really try and keep Dalby's back up against the cage. Because as soon as Dalby starts pressing him up and he's fighting on the back foot, he's not going to be able to generate the power like he does when he's going forward. Because when you're going backwards, your hips aren't in front of, like, you can't get your hips and body weight over the top of your legs and like lean forward as much because you kind of going backwards and you have to throw on the back foot, which is why I think he's going to struggle. So I do think he's going to win the first round. It'll be quite clean. Like, he'll probably go in there, double leg him, Dalby, take him down. Even though Dalby's got good takedown defense, I think he'll do light work of him in the first round, get a 10-9, not a 10-8, but a 10-9, land some damaging strikes, but Dalby will eat them. And then the second round, it will be the same like the Aliskerov. He will slow down. The striking on the feet will become a bit more competitive, but I think Dalby doesn't really hit people that hard. I'm shocked how he actually finished Gabriel Bonfim, but then I think after a while, Dalby's just going to start growing into the fight. Like 1 minute and 30 left of the second round. You're going to see him proper, like hitting him with combinations because he throws a lot. It's not like one punch move. It's like multiple punches and bunches. Whereas Rinat's like 2-punch combinations. They're looking to knock you out of every single one. But I think damaging strikes go to Rinat. Dalby third round. Rinat's starting to gas. He's fighting on the back foot now. Dalby's shooting for a takedown. Doesn't get it. Starts clinching him up against the cage. Holding in there. Working the body. Trying to slow him down. But because he can't get the finish and he don't have the power to do it, he'll lose a decision. That's how I see it. But I can see it round 2 and round 3 for Dalby just because of the pace. And Rinat, I don't think you can keep at that pace against a guy who's going to push him back later on in the fight. Right, Nasrat Haqparast versus Jared Gordon. This one's a really hard pick. Like on paper, it's not a bad shout to pick Jared Gordon, but I think he was getting older now. He's taking more damage. Nasrat Haqparast has power, but just struggles to finish people. So you know what, I'm going to go with Nasrat Haqparast. Like, he struggled with landing Quinones, but they were leg kicks. It wasn't like significant punches to the head. But I'm starting to think, I think he's going to KO him round 3. I think Jared Gordon's very breakable. He has a good start in fights. He adapts to his opponent. Like, sometimes his IQ can be on point and read. Like the Paddy Pimblett knowing he's just throwing a straight punch. Just move your head off the centre line. His head is centre, overhand right him. Then you look at the Mark Madsen fight. He's trying to get the takedowns, can't get it. Stops them. Was able to just beat him up from clinch range and put his back against the cage. Bobby Green. He is outstriking Jared Gordon early. But then Jared Gordon adapts to what he's doing. Hands are down. Paddy Pimblett method again. Overhand right. Your hands are down. Eventually, if you keep throwing them with volume, you're going to get caught. And Bobby Green's not a great chin as well. But I think Jared Gordon, his chin has been suspect in the past. It really is. As good as his striking is, he's older now. Took that headbutt. Yeah, his chin's recovered. But then I look at the losses like, I'm not even going to go into that because we all know that was a robbery. What was it? The Joachim Silva loss, for example. Ones like that where he can throw a lot early, but then when he has a guy who's going to be in his face and isn't going to stop, and then can land a powerful strike like Nasrat Haqparast can, it can cause like significant damage. And it's not like he gets knockouts all the time, but he has the power to do it. And you look at the opponents he's fought against, John Makadesi. To me, he seems like a hard guy to finish at times. Landon Quinones, again, young. He hasn't taken too much damage. He can survive the punches. Jamie Malarkey, again, I think of Jared Gordon's chin, not in the Malarkey category exactly, because his is just cooked, McKinney type of chin, but it's a suspect chin where if you land on him clean, you can put him down. And I think that's what Nasrat Haqparast's going to do, especially with that right cross. He throws a lot of them, and he throws with a lot of volume. So eventually, it's going to land, and that's where I see the knockout happening. Right, I had to think about this fight here, but I'm going with Shara Magomedov to win via decision. I think he's got to be careful because this guy, believe it or not, took down Dricus du Plessis. And yes, I know he's fighting Israel Adesanya, but he actually looked all right in the first round. He was getting takedowns. He didn't hold him for too long, but his striking looked good on the outside. And he's been doing a lot of kickboxing competitions and modified rules, which is pretty much probably MMA in a smaller cage. So I think he's preparing to strike against Shara Magomedov, because if he was smart, this would be a very winnable fight for him, because he could go out there and look to take him down, because we saw Shara Magomedov takedown defense 0 for a Dagestani guy. Well, not Dagestani, for a guy from Russia. Really bad. Like, extremely bad. But one thing he does well on the ground, offensively, was their elbows, like he's Tony Ferguson, hammering away like he's Conor McGregor against Dustin Poirier. That's all he can do on the ground. But if you're talking about pure stand-up, he will school Lutterbach on the feet. He is so, like, high fight IQ. He does a lot of knees, a lot of inside kicks to the thighs to make that leg swell up, a lot of side kicks to the body, taekwondo combinations like high kick into the head into a side kick. Very good body work, and I think he's going to slow down Lutterbach. I don't think he's going to get the finish, because I think he has to be reserved against a guy like this, because this guy isn't a guy who just can grapple and is just a one-punch knockout artist. No, his striking actually looks half decent. The only problem with him is when he comes up against a technical striker on the level of Shara Magomedov, and he decides to stand there and try and trade with him on the feet, he tends to struggle when he does that against people. But Shara Magomedov, his worst opponents are people who are going to look to take him down. And this guy could on paper. 14 wins by KO, 13 by submission, all in the first round. And he took down Duplessis in the first round, but I don't think he will. The last time he got a submission was in 2021. He doesn't look to go for submissions. He might grapple with you, but he'll only do it after he's knocked you down. So he's pretty much a guy who's a kickboxer who has got a grappling background but doesn't like to use it that much. And the only time he used it was back in the day. So I expect Shara Magomedov to just kick his legs, make them swell, and just beat him up for 5 rounds with pretty much body kicks and not even have to use his hands that much, because he kind of uses kicks like how you'd use a jab. For example, they're the most thrown strike. In a fight, the most thrown strike usually are your punches. Not always intentionally, but it's just a thing where it happens. But with Shara, he uses his legs like a jab. And his punches, he'll usually follow up with after using his kicks. So the kicks set up the strikes instead of the punches setting up the kicks, if you know what I mean. So yeah. Right, Johnny Walker versus Volkan Oezdemir. Volkan Oezdemir has power, but sometimes he makes me question myself with his striking. I think back to that first round he had with Paul Craig, which we all know he won. He got caught at the end of the round with a 1-2 head kick combination. I know if you get into a fight, you're going to get hurt. People will say it's going into a swimming pool and then complaining about getting wet. Well, obviously you are. And I know it's a stupid analogy, but I'm just saying. Johnny Walker against Oezdemir, I expect Johnny Walker to KO him in the second round. I don't think he'll KO him in the first, because I think after that win that he had against Bogdan Guskov, the commentators, I believe, were saying before the fight he's been training more in grappling, or that might have been Volkov against, I'm wrong. That was Volkov against Taito Ivasa, but I believe after that win, he's going to have the confidence and he's going to decide, right, I'm going to go out there and try and grapple with Johnny Walker. But then if you do that, you risk getting submitted, because Johnny Walker can do submissions. He's got jiu-jitsu, but I think he would be too hard to just take down. 6'6", built like he's a heavyweight. He's going to be stronger than Oezdemir. He carries more power. The only problem with him is his glass jaw. We all know that. Striking-wise, Oezdemir looks more technical, but if you want to talk about raw power and a guy who can just grab you by the head like he did to Khalil Rountree and just dig his elbows into your skull, that is Johnny Walker for you. And I don't think he'll need to do that. I think he will leg kick Oezdemir. But then you might argue with the kickboxing of Oezdemir, he'll be able to teep and check them. But that's not where I think the knockout will come. I think he'll be using his legs to set up the punches. So as you see him go for the leg kicks, he's going to teep. And off the teep, the instant reaction by Walker is to throw a hook. Because when you teep, some fighters, if you're not a Muay Thai, you'll kind of have your hands kind of lower. And I expect Oezdemir to do that a lot and get caught with that left hook and expect him to get put down in the second round by KO. But a decision is very likely, because Johnny Walker, he knows his chin. He knows it isn't great. And when you know your chin isn't great, you're kind of more precautionary when you're going for finishes. You don't want to go all out, leave your chin exposed off counters. So I can see a scenario where that happens, but I do think I'm kind of doubting myself for a minute. You know what? Yeah, I am going to go over decision. I've changed my mind, and I'll tell you why. Because coming off that knockout loss where it broke his nose, think about the damage that has. I think he might fight more cautiously. Leg kick him and then do what I said with the left hook counter. I think he's going to be doing that a lot. And not forcing a knockout, because he could have finished Anthony Smith multiple times in that fight he had. Where was it? And then what did he do? He let him live. And then you had him saying, "You're attacking my family," talking absolute nonsense in that cage. Yeah? So, decision. Even though you might argue Volkan Oezdemir's way of winning is more likely to be a decision, but I think it actually was going to be a decision just because of that knockout that just came into my mind. I'm thinking of alternative like scenarios that should happen. No, that should happen, but just I know won't happen for some weird reason. Right, Mohamed Naimov versus Felipe Lima. You're not going to like this. Again, I'm going with Felipe Lima to win via decision. I know Naimov has fought better opposition, and the only thing that makes me a little bit nervous is Felipe Lima's really a bantamweight. And remember when Naimov fought a guy who's really a bantamweight as well, in Nathaniel Wood? He lost. But it should have been a draw, and I'll tell you why. That referee was embarrassing. The amount of times this guy was not cheating, well, you could say cheating, kicking him to the body, but it missed the body and then hit like the nuts. And the referee just, he was clueless. He didn't step in and say, right, that's the point. So then Naimov took 2 rounds, and I believe Nathaniel Wood got the 3rd, and the referee didn't, like, he changed the fight because he didn't give it. It could have been a draw, and I think it should have been a draw. And I've noticed one thing, Naimov can slow down near the end of the fight. Lima, to me, his cardio looks extremely good. Like, I don't know who to compare him to, but his striking's very good. That 1-2 down the pipe. Naimov got dropped by Nathaniel Wood with that 1-2 down the pipe. It doesn't say it on the UFC stats, but they don't count knockdowns unless your back hits flat on the ground. Like, for example, Naimov dropped Nathaniel Wood. It says there was no knockdowns in that fight. When I counted, there was 2. And I believe that Felipe Lima, I know you're going to say that because he's a bit lighter, it's going to be harder, he's going to get held down, which is a possibility because I've seen with Felipe Lima, opponents have been able to take him down to the ground, but he never gets held there for the whole round. He's able to build his way back up, fight those underhooks, and push against the cage, and then get back to his striking. And not even that, his grappling is good as well. I think people forget his grappling is actually quite good, and he's the shorter guy. So Naimov's really going to have to work those uppercuts because Lima, he's going to have to like try and get close in range. Because if he fights out of range, even though Naimov isn't that technical with his striking, he's just like power and he's just like bulky and strong with takedowns, he'll be able to like manhandle him in that position. But I think Lima will hold his own and will grow into the fight from round like 2 minutes and 30 of round 2 to round 3. He will definitely win that 3rd round if they make it. And I think over 1.5 in this fight, highly likely, probably over 2.5 rounds. Because again, Naimov, his striking is just power. Like, he was losing to Jamie Malarkey, gets a flash knockdown and knocks him out. Like, don't get me wrong, Naimov is good. Like, he beat Nathaniel Wood, even though I said it shouldn't be. To make it competitive with a guy like that, to me, is extremely good because Nathaniel Wood could be a ranked opponent. He should be. Not anymore, obviously, but he looked like the type of guy who you would think is a ranked guy, but he wasn't. Felipe Lima, I believe he became champion of Octagon. But it's not just that. It's the small things that he's able to do, like be a submission threat off his back as well. Like, Nathaniel Wood's not really that, and he hasn't got like extremely good takedown defense. And Lima doesn't either, but he has a better way of getting back up off the ground after being taken down, whilst being able to threaten him with submission attempts, which is going to make Naimov want to posture up and not leave his head too down low. And he's going to want to have Lima's back up against the cage. But Lima doesn't really get taken down with his back up against the cage. It's usually from out of range, and then he scoots his way towards the cage to work his way back up. So I expect Lima to win round 2 and round 3, and I think he's going to do a lot of leg kicks, and he's going to keep him on the back foot, Lima's going to be put on the back foot, and you're going to see how good his striking is, and I think he's going to catch out Naimov at times in the fight. Right, Kevin Gastelum versus Daniel Rodriguez. For me, Rodriguez fell off after that Li Jingliang win, which, again, he should never have won that. So you could argue the last win was Kevin Lee, legitimately. His decision-making in fights are really poor. Like, he was doing all right against Neil Magny with his jab, which is probably his best attribute, but then goes for a takedown instead of... he had him on the ground and decides to stand up and then get submitted, I believe. And... go back to the fight here, Ian Machado Gary. I've got no word to use apart from he got cooked. He got walked down, marched down, and bullied, and whacked and slapped all over the shop. So Gastelum for me is going to win it. I think it'll be a decision because he fights in a very precautionary way now. He doesn't really hunt for the knockout. And again, he's made some dumb mistakes in the past as well. Adesanya, he could have been champion. Rocks Adesanya, decides I'm going to go for a takedown instead of carrying on in the feet and looking to finish him. Like small things like that. And I believe he can fight southpaw as well. And against Daniel Rodriguez, he can switch it a little bit. But I think that jab isn't going to work against Gastelum. I think he will overwhelm you. If you just pop out that jab, Kelvin Gastelum's the type of guy to fire off overhands. They're going to land on you eventually. Daniel Rodriguez's grappling isn't good enough to take down a guy like Gastelum and just hold him on the ground and look for a submission. It just really isn't. And you look at that Chris Curtis win. For me, that's a good win to have. Even though people said Curtis won, I don't think he did. Too inactive. Daniel Rodriguez, the opposite. Active, but it's very predictable. It's just jab. His boxing's all right. He might throw like one naked leg kick, but nothing else. And I think he headhunts a lot. And I think Gastelum can read that. And he'll have the more impactful shots in the fight because he carries more power. He throws with more power. Rodriguez is a guy who usually hits you with accuracy and then wins fights on a points decision. So I'm going with Kelvin Gastelum. Right, this fight here should be entertaining, and I think it will be. But Volkov's ruined it. I was actually thinking Volkov before. This is a good matchup on paper, you would think, if they didn't train with each other. But they do. And Volkov pretty much bottled it for himself. He literally has admitted that he never wins a round against Pavlovich in sparring. Who in the right mind is going to pick a guy? I know he might be doing a Ryan Garcia, trolling you all and then winning, but I don't think it's the type of thing like they like each other deep down. And not in that way. They've both got girlfriends, but you know what I mean. And if Pavlovich was doing this to him, I can just see a first round knockout. Like, it depends how Volkov turns up, because we've seen times where Volkov's turned up and he's just not looked right and he's been very passive, gun shy, and then gets lit up and then finished. And like the Derek Lewis one was a weird one. It really was, because he was winning that fight and then just gets clipped. Don't think it's that type of fight, because I think Volkov's more technical than Pavlovich. Pavlovich has got a very good long reach, but he just hits you and you go down. People can't take punches off him. People can take punches off Volkov, but he can also mix in kicks as well. And that Tom Aspinall performance as well, just getting whacked all over the place. So, you know how they're saying he never wins a round? I think he means not when they do MMA sparring. I think when they do pure boxing or stand-up. So I'm expecting Volkov. We don't really see it from him. We saw it against Tai Tuivasa here. I am expecting Volkov to go out there and grapple with Pavlovich, because we're yet to see the takedown defense of him. Blade shot on Pavlovich, but he was rocked and he was concussed and he shot out of desperation. I'm not counting them. I'm counting ones where you're at full health and you're ready to actually go for a takedown and you've actually processed it in your brain that you want to go for a takedown instead of going for one when you've already been compromised in your brain. So I'm expecting Pavlovich to walk him down like he does to everyone and throw that jab, and that right cross will land on the chin. Or Pavlovich will sometimes lead with his cross, high guard, then fire off the left jab, and that will put him down, and I can just see him. It won't be an out cold, it'll be a TKO finish. And it's just one of them where it's just written in the stars to happen unless Volkov pulls the biggest FU and lied to everyone about what actually happened in training, but I don't see that. Unless he goes to takedowns and makes it a grappling fight, he could win a decision. But I don't think he will. Right, the main event. We would have preferred Khamzat Chimaev, but I can't blame him. You can't do anything. Like, that thing screwed his lungs up forever. It really has. Like, I'm going with Ikram. And you might not like it. You might think, oh, you're going with the Ov again. Robert Whittaker. Both of them are a similar size for the weight class. Both of them could be welterweights. Robert Whittaker's power, it's not really there. He's a very technical guy. 1-2 head kick, move, good footwork. He can take damage early, come back. But again, he's one of those chinny fighters. And I think Aliskerov, I know he got knocked out by that uppercut by Khamzat Chimaev, but that was ages ago. Like, we don't see him getting rocked in every single fight. Like, Robert Whittaker, as much as I think he's a better striker technically than Ikram, I think Ikram's probably just a little bit bigger than Robert Whittaker. He carries more power in him, and I can see this fight ending, in my opinion, in like a round 3. I think this is going to be a very interesting fight, and I think Ikram's actually going to pull it off. Because one, Takedown defense, Robert Whittaker's elite. We all know that. He is extremely hard. You can't just go out there, unless you're a light heavyweight, unless you're way bigger than him, and just shoot for doubles. You had an Olympic wrestler in Yoel Romero, I know it was years ago, who just could not get the takedowns. And you're seeing Robert Whittaker butt scooping as Yoel Romero's going for the mat return and then scrambling out. That's the problem Ikram will have to deal with. So I think Robert Whittaker wins the first round. I think he wins the second round just, but then you're seeing that he's starting to slow down. Like, remember that jab he got caught with by Dricus du Plessis? I think people are forgetting about that. That was about how long ago? Almost a year ago. I think we're thinking about the Costa fight, which he was always going to win, in my opinion. I didn't see a way Costa could win unless he got a fluky knockout, which he almost did in the first round. But I don't see Ikram doing that, because you look at that fight with Phil Hawes and Ikram. The start of that fight, it was very slow by Ikram. It was like he wasn't throwing anything. Phil Hawes looked like he was hunting for a knockout. He was getting caught a few times. He was moving. It wasn't anything significant, but he didn't look too good until the knockout happened. And I think with Ikram, that's what we're going to get in this fight. He's not going to look too good until the knockout happens. Volkanovski to Puria type of vibes, where it starts off slow, loses the first round, and then everyone's thinking, oh, it's going to be a decision, Robert Whittaker. And then there's a momentum change. Ikram starting to back Robert Whittaker up. And then when his back comes up against the cage, which it can when he gets hurt, I think he's going to tee off him, flying knee, and just start going all like, I don't even know what combinations he's going to throw. Like, glitching out all over him pretty much. Throwing stupid combinations which are just going to overwhelm Whittaker and put him away in the third round. So that's what I think is going to happen. Robert Whittaker should win on paper, but I think this is the type of fight where, like Volkanovski, I don't really think Robert Whittaker's getting too old, but I think the damage he's taking, it eventually has to run out, and your chin, it does go eventually. And he has taken a lot of damage throughout his career. The Darren Till knockdown, the Dricus du Plessis, Israel Adesanya knockdown. Like, he is very chinny, but he recovers. But then I think Ikram's the type of guy where if he drops you as well, he could jump onto him and look for like a submission or ground and pound you. A lot of middleweights aren't grapplers, so when they knock you down, they want you to get back up and try and finish you again. Even though Robert Whittaker's got no jiu-jitsu, I can just see Ikram Aliskerov winning by knockout, and I think he's going to do it on the feet. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon. And it's actually weird. Am I wrong? But there is no women fights on the card, because they're not messing about. Every other card, I can't think of one card we've had in years where there's not been one women fight. And was there any pullouts with women? Let me have a look. Can't see any, but don't think there was. So yeah, good card. That's it. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.